So does everybody know everybody? Not exactly. Kind of. You're our host, right? These, you're the hostess. He's the host. Okay. And which are your children? Okay, two. You're the older boy. You're younger. You're older. Yeah. 5 years older. How old are you? And? 21. Five, that's five. And you're in college? You just finished. Law school, huh? What kind of law? Okay. I'm stalling for time, so that's I the we have a farm community in mid Pennsylvania, and in April, very interesting time to have a gathering. It was new people under the name of Body Mind Spirit Retreat, and one of the outstanding persons, very enthusiastic persons, was a girl who had just finished her undergraduate study in environmental law. Mm-hmm. And one of her questions was, uh, what's it called now? When you're advocating a cause, advocacy and Krishna consciousness go together. And I said, sure. However, the conditional, sure. If you try to do advocacy of environmental law and, have a better laws that make for a better environment, is that the solution to the problem? What's the problem? The problem is exploitation. So you can try to regulate exploitation, but it's the mode of passion. Mode of passion says whatever it is, it's not enough, and you got to have more, and you got to have more, and you make some laws, and they'll find ways to get around the laws. And the root problem, it's just like regulation of guns. You regulate guns, and when the lower modes of nature are acting, if you put it down over here, it's going to come up over there. So it doesn't mean don't pursue advocacy. I mean, I don't know what kind of law you want to go into. I stalled. Okay, we stalled for time. That was a little maneuver to get us hooked up to their Sangha group. What do they call it? Spiritual group? What do you call your group? Do you have a name for it? The group that we just hooked up with live. What do you call it? What's the name of the group? Spiritual Book Club. Spiritual Book Club. This one? This book? Bhagavatam? Yes? Yes, this one. Okay. Okay. You like the Bhagavatam? Do you like Srimad Bhagavatam? Me too. Ah. How far have you gotten in reading the Bhagavatam? How far? How many cantos? Here and there. You just get inspired and you open up. You start reading? Like that? I used to listen to it a lot. And then once I came to ISKCON and got all the books at Bhagavatam booklet, and then I started At random. Nothing, no organization or structure. Just close your eyes and pick something off the shelf. Like that? Yeah. So far, what's your favorite section that you've read? Gajendra Moksha and Prahlad. Have you read the whole Prahlad section from the Bhagavatam? Try Dhruva. Dhruva too. Oh, okay. I just completed a seminar. The entire, it took 30 hours to cover the Dhruva Maharaj step by step. It's really nice. So many lessons. Practical. Very practical. Okay, so now I think we're ready. Hare Krishna, Cat. You want Srimad Bhagavatam messages? Have a seat. Sit down. Okay. I've been reading from Kapila Dev. Kapila Dev? Yesterday. Okay. So here's a little background for those of you that may not be familiar. This is Canto 3. In Canto 3, towards the very, very beginning, this is chapter 25. Towards the very beginning of Canto 3, we find the discussion between Sukadev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, where Sukadev Goswami has just completed Canto 2, and there was some discussion that during the earlier part of Canto 1, there was mention that Uddhava, having been insulted in the royal assembly, he left and went on pilgrimage. And it is said that while on pilgrimage, did I say some other name? I said Uddhava? Okay, Vidura, excuse me. Vidura went on pilgrimage, he met Maitreya, and then he came back to Hastinapur to deliver his brother Dhritarashtra. So the question was, you mentioned that Vidura went on pilgrimage. Could you describe his pilgrimage? And then you said that he met Maitreya. That must have been a fantastic exchange between Maitreya and Vidura, because they're both such elevated personalities. Could you describe their exchange? So it takes 2.5 cantos to discuss their exchange between Maitreya and Vidura. So how that happens is, Vidura was on pilgrimage for a long time. He didn't just go to a few holy places and come back. He was on pilgrimage for 34 years, going pilgrimage from holy places to holy places. His reason was he had been so much in a contaminated atmosphere in the royal palace, so much politics and intrigue and skullduggery. He wanted to purify himself. So he went on pilgrimage, and while in pilgrimage he met holy persons. And while on pilgrimage he went to Prabhas, which is not far from Dwarka, and he came to know that Krishna had departed. And the whole of the Yadu dynasty from Dwarka had also departed because of the conflagration at Prabhas. And he continued on his pilgrimage, and then later, Vidura happens to meet Uddhava. And when you think of Uddhava, when you hear Uddhava's name, a light should go on. Krishna, like Arjuna, Krishna, because as Arjuna was a dear friend and cousin, Uddhava was even more dear and also a cousin, Krishna's cousin. And he was in his constant association in Dwarka, in Mathura and in Dwarka. Very, very close, deep relationship. So when he saw Uddhava, it was in Vrindavan, in a forest. Uddhava, look who's here. How wonderful to see you. And they started asking him all about the residents of Dwarka, although he knew that they had already departed. He didn't want to say. He wanted to. So Uddhava, hearing Krishna's name and about the associates of Krishna in Dwarka, he went into a trance. He lost external consciousness. He was so deeply absorbed in thought of Krishna. But he wanted to serve Vidura because he was elder. And so he pulled himself out of that absorption, trance-like absorption, and started speaking. And there's like 2 or 3 chapters. He's speaking about how wonderful is Krishna, and Krishna in Vrindavan, Krishna outside of Vrindavan. And because he got the answer, Vidura got the answer that he wanted from Uddhava. And then he started asking other questions, because Vidura is very learned, and Uddhava is a very learned and intimate associate of Krishna. So he asked him many, many, many questions. And Uddhava said, it would be impertinent of me to give answers to your questions, because not so far from here is Maitreya, who is very elder and very senior to me. Actually, Uddhava was more senior than Maitreya, not in age, but in spiritual qualification. And besides, I was given some service by Krishna to go to Badrik Ashram and take messages from Krishna to the associates of Narayan Rishi. So I have to go now. But he pointed the direction where Maitreya was. He went to find Maitreya. Wonderful exchange with Maitreya. And then many, many, many questions. And of interest, the part of the question he wanted to know, Vidura, was please describe creation. He didn't use exactly those words. But it's not that Vidura was an uneducated fellow. However, he wanted to hear that which he already knew from the most elevated personality, Maitreya. In fact, Uddhava said to Vidura that before Krishna departed, he said, soon Vidura will come, he should hear from Maitreya. So that's it. Krishna wanted him to hear from Maitreya. So he went to hear from Maitreya. And what we find in the 3rd canto, preceding this chapter 25, is a description of creation by Vishnu. It's one of the 10 essential topics of the Bhagavatam. Sarga, what Vishnu does to bring about creation. And then Visarga, what Brahma does to bring about creation. And then the next Sarga, Visarga, is filling up the universe that Brahma just created. So Manu and the descendants of Manu. So we hear something in this section about of the direct offspring or praja from the body of Brahma is Swayambhuva Manu. and his good wife Shatarupa. And interestingly, they appeared directly from his body without any help from his wife. Brahma is very powerful. So he manifested the first Manu, and Manu and Shatarupa had 5 children. There were 2 sons and 3 daughters. And we start to hear in the 4th canto about the sons. That's the Dhruva story, 4th canto. And in the 3rd canto, we're hearing about the daughters. Actually, we're just hearing about one of the daughters. And one of the daughters was Devahuti, the daughter of Swayambhuva Manu and Shatarupa. And there's this wonderful description, because some of the sons directly from the body of Brahma were the great sages, one of whom was Kardama Muni, great sage. Great sage Kardama was instructed by his father to assist him in creating praja. And so he went to the forest to purify himself, qualify himself in devotion to Vishnu, to become capable of producing good praja. And in the course of his being absorbed, this is Satya Yuga, and so the main process for spiritual perfection in Satya Yuga is dhyayate, meditation. Same as chapter 6, Bhagavad Gita, dhyayate. So he was engaged in meditation on Vishnu with such intense devotion that Vishnu came. Vishnu appeared, standing on the back of Garuda. So Garuda's wings are flapping, and Lord Vishnu is smiling, and Kardama pays obeisances again and again, and stands up and folded palms offers prayers. And Vishnu says many things. Said, I understand your heart. That's why I've appeared before you. You're very devoted to me, and you wish to have as a son my incarnation. You wish to have me as your son, so I will appear. But before I appear, you'll require a qualified wife. No worries. In 3 days, she's going to show up right here in the forest, accompanied by her father. Her father is Swayambhuva Manu. So Swayambhuva Manu, in 3 days' time, exactly as Vishnu said, he said, all you have to do is say yes. Pretty easy. Usually it's not so easy. Just say yes. And in your relationship with Devahuti, I will appear as your son. So his son, first there were 9 daughters, and then those 9 daughters were given in marriage. Brahma came and suggested or arranged those 9 daughters to be given in marriage to different sages. And those sages with these 9 daughters helped fill up the universe with different living entities, even different species, not just different humans. And Devahuti, together with Kardama Muni, they resided in the forest for a long, long time. Now she is the princess. She's used to royal comforts, but no problem. She by her choice, it's said how she made her choice. She made her choice because she heard about the qualities of Kardama Muni from Narada Muni. And that was it. Understanding his qualities, she let her father know, I'd like to marry Kardama Muni. So that's why he took her to the forest. They were married right in the forest. And they stayed in the forest together for tens of thousands of years. This is Satya Yuga. And she became lean and thin, just from the austerities that she was happily engaged in. in service to Kardama Muni. He then, after some time, recognized that she had served so nicely, but just like she also wished to have children. And so what he did was very, very mystical arrangement. With his mystic power, he created a flying city. Doesn't say how he did it, but he did it. Mantras or whatever it was, by his own power. Buildings with parks and trees and this and that's, and it could fly around the universe. So she was given some maid servants. She was dressed, cleaned very nicely, dressed very nicely, ornamented very nicely. And off they went around the universe, visiting various places, kind of like a little vacation from being in the forest. And then after some time, these 9 daughters who were given, and then when Brahma came, she was pregnant with Kapila Dev. So he informed her, within your womb, a form of Vishnu is there. This is Brahma to Devahuti and Kardama Muni. So even before their child was born, they knew that he was the personality of Godhead. And sure enough, he was the personality of Godhead. After some time, Kapila Dev grew to a stage of maturity. And Kardama Muni then made a request of his son, Kapila Dev, saying many nice things in glorification of Kapila Dev, and begging his consent, permission, blessings to return to the forest and continue with his meditation, and achieved again a stage of total absorption. We read this the other day. Total absorption in the personality of Godhead, and his heart fixed on the personality of Godhead, having no material desires whatsoever. And he achieved spiritual perfection. And at the end of his life, he went to the spiritual world. And that's how the chapter 24 ends. All that was just a little background on chapter 25. There was, when we had our previous discussion, I said I would do some research to find out what Rupa Goswami has to say about Kapila Dev. And I'll report to you that there's not a lot to say about Kapila Dev. In fact, there's categories of avatars, and he's a Shaktivesh avatar, which means he's empowered, Jiva avatar. And there's divisions amongst the Shaktivesh avatars. And one of the divisions that he follows, or is in the group of, is he gives spiritual teachings, and there's very little known about his life. Not just he, but the others in that group. So we don't hear a lot about him. But he's a Shaktivesh avatar giving teachings. He's especially known, reputedly known, for giving teachings on Sankhya philosophy. And it's very elaborate. It's in the very next chapter, chapter 26. But the purpose of Sankhya, there's atheistic Sankhya, or like what modern science likes, Sankhya. I don't know if you're aware of that, but they like Sankhya. Western philosophers like Sankhya because, as far as they're concerned, modern scientists are concerned, there's just one thing. There's matter, and the laws governing matter, and there isn't another thing. There's no God, there's no spirit or any of those wishy-washy notional things. There's just matter and the laws governing matter. So that's atheistic Sankhya. And there's theistic Sankhya that says, yes, there's divisions of matter, and those divisions of matter are one of the energies of the source of all energies, the energetic. And the energetic is the Supreme Person, and there's spiritual energies, and there's mixing of the spiritual material energies and so forth. That's theistic Sankhya. Kapila Dev taught that one. And the conclusion of the theistic Sankhya is once you understand the categories of matter and the categories of spirit, then it gives impetus and gives rise through proper knowledge to take full shelter of spirit. In fact, shelter of Supreme Spirit. In fact, devotional service unto the Supreme Spiritual Person. So that's what chapter 25 is. We just began chapter 25. There's a couple other things that this research from Rupa Goswami says about Kapila Dev. You might find it interesting. In the teachings of devotion, it is said there are 9 principal processes of devotion, and there's primary and secondary rasas, and there's lords of each of those rasas. The lord of Shanta rasa, Shanta is neutrality, is Kapila. And the explanation given is he is understood to be the lord of Shanta rasa because of the emphasis upon meditation. You know, there's 3 chapters in this whole description of Kapila Dev in the Bhagavatam, and there are 3 that are focused on devotional service. Devotional service, devotional service, and devotional service. It's not just meditation and it being inactive, because devotional service means activity. The dhatu, or the verbal root for bhakti, is bhaj, B-H-A-J. And bhaj means senses interacting with sense activities, sense objects in practical work, practical service, as a form of worship or devotion, an activity of devotion unto the Supreme. That's the meaning of bhakti, or the root word bhaj, like bhajan. Bhaj. Bhakti is practical activity. So he's teaching not just neutrality meditation, yes, meditation, but not neutrality meditation, active, starting with the mind, and then when the mind is properly directed, then the senses will be properly directed. See it the other way. If the mind is not properly directed, the senses won't be properly directed. What the mind does is of great importance, paramount importance, in any form of yoga. And for that matter, it's of great importance in life, even non-yoga life. What the mind does is going to carry you to whatever you do, like law school. Or, behind the mind, there's the intelligence that's analyzing things and then giving direction. But where the mind goes is where the soul goes. In conditional life, yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajatante kalevaram. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, whatever the mind is absorbed in, that's where you're going. And at the end, ante kalevaram, at the end of life, whatever the mind is absorbed in is what you've been absorbed in during your lifetime. You have habits of the body and the mind from what you've been doing during your lifetime, and that's where you're going to go. Whatever the mind is absorbed in at the moment of death, the mind will carry you to that destination. So you better be careful with what's up with the mind, because that's where you're going. I mean, it's not a problem if your mind is properly oriented. Well, it's not just law school or some other occupation or some other ashram. It's what's at the other end of that occupation. What's the goal? What's the goal? That was the answer that I gave to this girl that's doing environmental law. If the goal is do you connect with Krishna and you connect your professional work with that which is pleasing and satisfying to Krishna? Be an advocate, be an activist, by all means, towards the goal. Minus the goal, you're not going to get there. You'll just do what most people do. You just take the problem from the left shoulder and put it on your right shoulder. Take it from your right shoulder, put it on your head. Take it off your head, put it on your back. You know, the problem is forgetfulness of who we are and our relationship with the source of all things. That's the problem. Don't solve that problem, you haven't solved the problem. Solve that problem, and you've solved the problem. Means other things will be aligned with that. That's where the mind is going to go. And that's where you'll go, and the people that are connected with you will go, because that's where you're going. And if not, then it's an endless series of adjustments of things to make it look like happiness. Try to feel like happiness, but it's somehow insufficient, because it's not who we really are. And it's not the mission and purpose of life. So now that's background to carrying on with our discussion on Canto 3, Chapter 25, entitled The Glories of Devotional Service. And the discussion, Maitreya is speaking to Vidura. Maitreya said, when Kardama left for the forest, Lord Kapila stayed on the strand of the Bindu Sarovar to please his mother Devahuti. So what happened was, after maturity, Kardama requested to go back to the forest to achieve spiritual perfection, which was chapter 24. And that meant there's Devahuti, his wife. She's attached. She's been serving her husband for tens of thousands of years, off in the forest. I mean, her life is her husband. And he's now gone. So now what? So Kapila is providing a nice association for his mother. Kapila stayed on the strand of the Bindu Sarovar to please his mother Devahuti. So he's taking charge of looking after his mother. When Kapila, who could show her the ultimate goal of the absolute truth, was sitting leisurely before her, Devahuti remembered the words of Brahma that he had spoken to her, and she therefore began to question Kapila as follows. So when I mentioned, after the 9 daughters were born, and Devahuti was pregnant with Kapila, Brahma came. So Brahma is like the grandfather. Swayambhuva Manu is the father. And Swayambhuva Manu's father is Lord Brahma. And then there's the granddaughter, Devahuti. So, and her husband. So, Brahma came, said something about the 9 daughters, and said something to Devahuti about Kapila. He said, the child in your womb is the personality of Godhead. So take good care of him. Serve him. Serve the personality of Godhead nicely, in the mood of mother and son. So remembering the words of Brahma, Devahuti said, I am very sick of this disturbance caused by my material senses. For because of this sense disturbance, my Lord, I have fallen into the abyss of ignorance. In other words, she's disturbed because she has grown attached, and the object of her attachment is now gone. I mean, it's going to happen for all of us, whatever persons or other objects. The cat that was moving around, you get attached, and after some time, the cat's going to be gone. Doesn't mean don't have a cat or don't have family members, but it's going to happen. So she's feeling those feelings. Purport. Here the word asat indriya tarshanat is significant. Asat means impermanent or temporary, and indriya means senses. Asat indriya tarshanat means from being agitated by the temporary manifest senses of the material body. Unquote. We are evolving through different statuses of material bodily existence, sometimes in a human body, sometimes in an animal body, and therefore the engagements of our material senses are also changing. Anything which changes is called temporary, asat. We should know that beyond these temporary senses are our permanent senses, which are now covered by the material body. The permanent senses, being contaminated by matter, are not acting properly. Devotional service, therefore, involves freeing the senses from this contamination. When the contamination is completely removed and the senses act in the purity of unalloyed Krishna consciousness, we have reached Sat Indriya, or eternal sensory activities. Eternal sensory activities are called devotional service. I mean, the title of the chapter is The Glories of Devotional Service. Whereas temporary sensory activities are called sense gratification. Unless one becomes tired of material sense gratification, there is no opportunity to hear transcendental messages from a person like Kapila. I mean, there's opportunity, but not attracted. Too busy. Too busy. No time. Too busy. In Ishopanishad, there's this phrase that Prabhupada uses I like very much. Electrical energy is one energy. However, an electrician will know how to make electrical energy make things cool or make things hot. It's the same energy. And knowing the technology of the affair, electricity making things hot, electricity making things cold. Similarly, Krishna's energies act differently depending upon the orientation of the heart. If there's the orientation of the heart away from Krishna, then the energy of Krishna acts in such a way we don't have time. And people will say, if we ask them, please read or please something, I have no time. But they won't even talk to you. It's like they're too busy. Time is money. No time. Got to make money. Money, money, money. So when there's absorption in turning attention away from Krishna, then the material energy acts in such a way, it keeps that person really, really busy. It's true. They're too busy because it's how the energy is acting. However, try it. If the attention starts to turn towards Krishna, then material energy starts to work differently. It becomes spiritual energy. And then, sure enough, there's time. It's not like when you decide to turn your attention to Krishna, that you become irresponsible in ordinary affairs or worldly affairs. That's not the case. That's not the case. You become more proficient and more efficient. It's a fact. Because where does ability come from? It comes from Krishna. He says in the Bhagavad Gita, I'm the ability of man, the intelligence of the intelligent, the prowess in all powerful men. All of those things come from the source. And if you turn your attention to the source, do you have more ability or less? You have more intelligence or less? You have more strength, the strength of the strong. You have more, not less. And just using it in alignment with the source of everything. You not become irresponsible or do less. Just the time energy works differently. And sure enough, there is time. Even for busy people, there's time. How? The time energy works differently. The internal energy works differently than the external energy, although it's like the electricity, it's one energy. It just works differently depending upon our heart's orientation towards the Supreme. It sounds a little like double talk, but it's not. It's exactly how things work. And one who goes down the path of devotional service, that's what this chapter is, Glories of Devotional Service. You experience it, you feel it palpably, not notionally. You feel it. And it's how your life starts to move. And there is time. There's time to do responsible things in this world, and there's time to do your relationship with Krishna things. In fact, the worldly things take on a dimension that it's an offering to Krishna. Same as Krishna's teaching in Bhagavad Gita. We're entitled to perform our prescribed duties. We're not entitled to the fruits of our work. Everyone knows that verse. Karmani vikaraste ma paleshu kadachana. Ma paleshu. You're not entitled to the pala of your work. You're entitled to perform your duty. Do it nicely because it's for Krishna. But the fruit is for Krishna. You offer the fruits to Krishna. You don't become lazy. You're very energetic because it's for Krishna. Just like when you're doing something out of love, you're tireless. Unless one becomes tired of material sense gratification, there is no opportunity to hear transcendental messages from a person like Kapila. No time, no opportunity means no thanks. I'm too busy. I've got lots of responsibility. Let me tell you, I've got lots of responsibility. I don't have any time. That's the no opportunity. Because the material energy keeps you very busy. It's true, very busy. And then there's another channel to connect with. That same energy would keep you fully absorbed in Krishna thought and Krishna seva. Activity doesn't have to change. It's a nice teaching. I'll say the same thing a different way. I'm speaking like this because I appreciate our hostess, probably some others, have an appreciation for Bhagavatam. So there's a very nice teaching in Canto 10, Chapter 14, spoken by Lord Brahma. This the situation is Brahma Vimohan Lila. Brahma wanted to test what's the limit of Krishna's power. So what did Brahma do? He did something really stupid. He kidnapped the calves and cowherd boys and put them in a cave to see what Krishna would do. He was matching his mystic power against Krishna, because taking them was a mystic arrangement. They were just, the calves were just wandering. By mystic power, he gathered them, put them in a cave. And the boys were having lunch. And the boys said, "Where are the calves?" And Krishna said, "Don't worry, I'll find the calves. You continue with lunch." So when Krishna went up to get lunch and look for the calves, Brahma, by mystic power, put the boys in a cave and came back to the scene of the crime to see what Krishna was going to do. So Krishna knew what Brahma wanted. What's the limit of my mystic power? He showed by his mystic power the unlimitedness of his mystic power. He gave him a whole show. Many things described in the Bhagavatam. And then after manifesting equally the forms of each of the cowherd boys and each of the calves, and then showing forms of Narayana for each one of the calves and each one of the cowherd boys, and all of the potencies which are unlimited of Narayana surrounding each of the forms of Narayana, and the personified Vedas, and they're all singing hymns and prayers in a big cacophony of sound, all of a sudden, poof, the whole thing just disappeared, because Krishna withdrew those manifestations of him. It was just Krishna smiling, looking directly in Brahma's eye. And Brahma offered beautiful prayers. And one of those prayers was one that says the same thing that it says here. Stanes tatakshruti gatam tanavan manobhir. Stay in your position. Jnane prayasa udapasya namanta eva. To understand Krishna by jnana prayasa, by endeavor of intellectual prowess, it's insufficient. It's never going to be successful. Jnane prayasa udapasya. Cast far away though that effort. Namanta eva. Offer your obeisances unto Krishna. Namanta eva. And what should you do instead? Stanes tatak. Stay in your position. Stanes tatak. Stay in your position. Everyone in this room, stay in your position. You don't have to renounce stuff. Stay in your position. Shruti gatam tanavan manobhir. And hear messages of transcendence. Now here we just read, people that are too much absorbed in sense gratification, and that's been already defined in the little short paragraph. It's where the mind and the senses are directed away. So one's too much absorbed in directing your mind and senses away, you're not going to hear. You're too busy. But when one has the opportunity, stay in your position, but hear. And not but, and hear with some faith in that sound vibration that is coming from the spiritual realm. It's really nice. There's a science to it, and the science is Shabda Praman. Praman means evidence, right? In law. Pramana. It's a nice Sanskrit word to know when you're doing your law studies. Pramana means evidence. The means of verifying something is pramana. And the best means of verification is shabda. Pramana. P-R-A. Pramana. P-R-A-M-A-N-A. Pramana. It means evidence. Shabda. Pramana. And the best of the Shabda pramana is aparusheya, because human-generated Shabda has defects. Because all living entities, all conditioned souls have defects. You ever make mistakes? That's one of them. You don't make mistakes. Oh. But so there are 4 defects. One of them is making mistakes. So imperfect senses, subject to illusion, and then the 4th is cheating. I still want to say what's what. That's cheating. So 4 defects from a human being, and therefore a Purusheya Shabda Pramana. That's the best means of knowing anything, what to speak of transcendence. It's the best means of knowing anything, what to speak of transcendence. Aparusheya Shabda. It's the best evidence for knowing about anything. So that's Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, because the speaker of Bhagavad Gita is this Parama Purusha, the Supreme Person, who is infallible. He's infallible. He doesn't make mistakes. So you hear from him, you're going to get the real story. And you don't hear from him, you're going to hear from somebody else. And you hear from somebody else, and it's going to have defects. That's the nature of this world. So sound is really important. I've just spent some time sharing with you all. Spent some time this morning, 6:30 a.m., having a class with devotees from China. And there were 160-something people online for this class this morning. One of the topics was this one, that one of the 6 Goswamis, Raghunath Das Goswami, is teaching the path of achieving Krishna Prema, the internal cultivation. And one of the things that he advises is be very vigilant, be very discriminating about the sounds that you hear. Because the sounds that you hear does something inside. It stimulates desire. It activates desire. Like, easy to understand. You hear sounds that are elevating, it elevates consciousness. You hear sounds that are degrading, and it degrades consciousness. You hear sounds about passion, and it increases passion. You hear sounds about violence, and it stimulates violence. So the sounds that you hear, Raghunath Das Goswami is very, very clear. Beware of mundane sound, because it stimulates mundane desire, which then steals from the heart the jewel of your natural, innate tendency for loving Krishna, or loving God. It's stolen by material sound. So a big part of material civilization is material sound. And a big part of spiritual civilization is spiritual sound. Mantra and Aparusheya Shabda, Srimad Bhagavatam. Hearing it, just hearing it. Supposing someone doesn't understand it, no problem. Because by hearing it, it'll cleanse consciousness, and gradually, in that cleansed state of consciousness, one will start to be able to understand. One cannot understand when consciousness is not cleansed. By cleansing of consciousness, one can start to understand. Just continue to hear. That's what Prabhupada did. He described that the audience that he met in the West, the young Western people, they were a sorry bunch. We were a sorry bunch. But beneath the covering of illusion, there was a jewel-like presence, and Prabhupada polished the jewel and made persons happy and bright-faced. He said priests would comment. Sometimes priests would comment to him, "Oh, your disciples, they look so bright-faced. How did you do this?" It's just sound. Of course, love, but sound. And sound helps stir that feeling, the consciousness of love. So back to devotional service. Devahuti expressed that she was tired. Now that her husband had left home, she wanted to get relief by hearing instructions from Lord Kapila. I'll just read one more verse and we'll end. Your Lordship, this is no. Devahuti speaking to her son, who she knows, hearing from Lord Brahma. He's the personality of Godhead, her son. Your Lordship is my only means of getting out of this darkest region of ignorance, because you are my transcendental eye, which, by your mercy only, I have attained after many, many births. Purport. This verse is very instructive, since it indicates the relationship between the spiritual master and the disciple. In this case, the son is the spiritual master, and the mother is the disciple. The disciple or conditioned soul is put into this darkest region of ignorance, and therefore is entangled in the material existence of sense gratification. It is very difficult to get out of this entanglement and attain freedom. But if one is fortunate enough to get the association of a spiritual master like Kapila Muni or his representative, then by his grace one can be delivered from the mire of ignorance. The spiritual master is therefore worshipped as one who delivers the disciple from the mire of ignorance with the light of the torch of knowledge. The word paragam is very significant. Paragam refers to one who can take the disciple to the other side. This side is conditioned life. The other side is the life of freedom. The spiritual master takes the disciple to the other side by opening his eyes with knowledge. We are suffering simply because of ignorance. By the instruction of the spiritual master, the darkness of ignorance is removed, and thus the disciple is enabled to go to the side of freedom. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that after many, many births, one surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, if after many, many births, one is able to find a bona fide spiritual master and surrender to such a bona fide representative of Krishna, one can be taken to the side of light. So this is her questions, and she's going to be asking, coming up, she's going to be asking, how do I get out of this sad, sorrowful condition of life? It doesn't feel right. How do I get free from this? He likes her question, and he appreciates her question, and he's going to give the answer. It's in essence sadhu sangha, because with sadhu sangha you get everything. You get the activities that sadhus do. You do those activities with those sadhus do. That's bhajana kriya, devotional practice. And with that devotional practice, the heart becomes cleansed. And when the heart becomes cleansed, that sadness, the material condition of life, is cleansed away. And within, the natural happiness of the soul within is what one experiences. And it's true. It works. So that's chapter 25. We're just getting started. Devahuti's approach to her son, speaking of her son as my Lord. She's approaching him as one approaches a spiritual master, and she wants light in this condition of sorrow that she's feeling from great separation from her husband. So there we are. Let's see if there's some discussion on this or whatever you'd like to discuss. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, Guru Maharaj, you were talking about material senses and spiritual senses.
Yes.
And as per my understanding, this is what I understood, that if you engage your material senses, we all, like, as us in this material world, if we engage our material senses in Krishna's service, we can make those spiritual senses. Is that
Little editing.
okay?
The senses, material senses, become spiritualized. The classic example that Prabhupada gives is putting iron into fire. Iron is iron. It's not fire. But you put it in fire, and it starts to get warm, warmer, warmer, warmer. Becomes red hot, and then it acts just like fire. You take it out of the fire and touch it to something that'll burn, and it starts another fire. It's fire, no longer just iron. So the material senses become spiritualized in the same way. By spiritual engagement with spiritual object.
So what would be like, I don't know if this makes sense, but what would be like a distinguishing factor, like between like a material sense and a spiritual sense?
Easy. We discussed it during this Japa retreat, and I'll just repeat something that we heard. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and his father, Bhaktivinoda, described the same thing, that the mantra appears to be something material. When the ear hears it and the tongue vibrates it, it appears to be material. And so one may experience it as if it's material, but it's not. It appears to be simply syllables, but if one, Bhaktisiddhanta's word is, when the material senses become effaced. Effaced means like coins when they rub together, and after a long time you can't even distinguish what's on the coin. It's because it's been effaced. It's been rubbed so many times. So the covering becomes effaced, leaving what's behind the covering. Behind the covering of the material senses are spiritual senses. And then one can chant with a spiritual tongue and hear with a spiritual ear. That's an example.
So someone with a spiritual sense, like for me, if I get distracted, you gave the example of chanting. So if I get distracted, someone with a spiritual sense instead wouldn't have any of that.
The sound is not directly contacting spiritual senses. You take the iron rod out of the fire,
Yes.
and it becomes just iron rod. It doesn't have the fiery quality anymore. You took it out of the fire. It's been sitting around for some time. It's cold again. No? I've learned to be very patient. So don't mind me just being very patient with all of you. Someone will come up with something that inspires.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. You gave the example of electrician turning the same electricity into heating or cooling.
Yes.
So, I mean, in our case, I mean, we are not probably expert electricians. So, how do we transform whatever we have in terms of our material aspects? How to transform that into?
Well, we don't transform. Krishna's the electrician. What we do is we turn our attention to Krishna. And under the guidance of qualified persons, we direct our activity, our ability, our everything, whatever it is, our tongue, our eyes, our power of speech, our legs, our hands. We direct the activities under the guidance of Scripture and a qualified teacher. We direct them towards pleasing Krishna. We may not be so good at it. We may be a little clumsy. It may be, not so good. But Krishna then, seeing that effort, he's the electrician, he can convert it from the material type to the spiritual type. So it's a reciprocation it's a relationship between us saying yes to Krishna, at least, in a preliminary practice way, and Krishna acknowledging, oh, they're turning their attention to me. Let me help them. And, the electrician is doing his work. The same energy, the same, say, endeavor, but the consciousness, the consciousness behind is everything, and the reciprocation from Krishna by seeing that shift of consciousness is the other part of everything. So we transform, back to your question, we transform the material into spiritual by turning our attention to Krishna, understanding the how-to instructions given by Scripture and guided by teachers. And then we do those things. It's just the beginning. It's not mature yet, but it's the beginning. And it's how things become transformed into spiritual. The same things, stane statak, the same things that we were doing before. Some of them will drop off, but many of the core things that we do, that's just part of our nature, our psychophysical nature, we do those things for Krishna. And learn how to. And that, it starts with sound. So you hear good sounds. Here's aparusheya shabda, sound. And consciousness transformation will begin. And as consciousness is transformed, Krishna will see, Krishna will do his electrician work. He'll switch from this to that, from material to spiritual. We can't do that on our own.
Here is the question, in the Upanishads, we learn about Mahavakyas, Aham Brahmasmi.
Learn about?
Mahavakyas.
Mahavakya. Okay.
Aham Brahmasmi, Pragnanam Brahma, and Tattvamasi. So in that, according to that, the same consciousness, the same Paramatma's consciousness is there in every one of us. Then why? Why that same supreme consciousness, when it is divided in all, why all this is happening?
Why? Let me say back what I think you're asking, and I probably didn't get it right. There are spiritual sounds In some schools, it's called Mahavakyas. And they're there, so we're not there. How did it get to the? How do we become covered? How do we get into this material condition? That's your question?
No,
No.
according to those Upanishad Vakyas, right? So Aham Brahmasmi or
Etc.
Tattvamasi.
Yeah.
According to that, so the same Paramatma or same the Supreme Consciousness is there in every one of us.
Therefore,
Why every consciousness is not behaving right? Why all this?
why are we not experiencing that? That's your
Yes.
question?
Yes.
So it's you're saying the same thing I thought you said. It has everything to do with the relationship with Krishna. You have children. Supposing you have a desire that your children do something that's good for them. Supposing. Always. And sometimes they say yes. And not always will they say yes. Sometimes they'll say a polite no. Sometimes they'll say not such a polite no. Sometimes they won't even say. They'll just go and do. So your children have free will. We're parts and parcels of the Supreme with tiny characteristics of the Supreme who has unlimited free will. We have tiny free will. When we have a free will that says no, then it's not like we go out of existence. He gives us something to do in the no category. It's called Maya. So Maya covers the consciousness of the soul so that the soul doesn't recognize the Mahavakyas. Although the super soul is within the heart saying, remember me? And we're going, no. And, another way of asking in very simple terms, why creation? Why? Because we wanted it. And to say we wanted it, it's another way of saying, I don't want. I don't want to be subordinate. I want to be independent. Think of your children. I want to be independent. And a loving mother doesn't say, I'm sorry, you have no independence. They'll say, watch me. So, we have independence and we've misused it. And there's many things to do besides spiritual things. Too many. And it gets more and more complicated and implicated in karma, and it's really hard to get out once you're in. But that's how it happens. We desire it. And it's not as easy as doing a U-turn. Okay, I wanted some fun. I'm not having fun. So I'm going to do a U-turn and go back to spiritual. Not so easy. Why is it not so easy? Because we're attached. We're not attached to suffering, but we're attached to the sources of suffering. And the sources of suffering are forgetfulness of Krishna. Ignorance. The root cause of suffering, if you're a Buddhist, it's desire. If you're a Vaishnava, it's ignorance. Ignorance leads to ignorant desire, leads to ignorant activity, leads to suffering. The root cause is ignorance. The mama, the mother that produces all other little baby ignorances, is ignoring Krishna. That's why we turned our back. And so what do we get? Shadow. And it's not just just turn around, do a 180 and turn around and to face the light. We're attached to the other. That's why. It's there because we wanted it, and we're attached to it, although it's the source of misery. The consciousness is the source of misery. So how do you restore the consciousness? Then that's yoga. Yes, there are Mahavakyas, but there's more than Mahavakyas are needed. That's a tattva or truth. Now, what's the behavior of someone who's situated in tattva? Ye Krishna tattva veta se guru hoy. The tattva is service. What's the connection? The connection is love. And with love, there's loving activity. But we're busy saying no. Or maybe, which is just a soft no. Okay?
I have another question, but this is regarding the timelines, because when I'm reading something, when I have to mention the timelines, this is the question came. The bulk of Mahabharata was probably compiled as per the dates that are available is 3rd century BCE to 3rd century CE, which is the oldest preserved parts are not much older than 400 BC as per the dates available. The original events was related by the epic probably fall between the 9th and 8th centuries. That's what I read it, at least. At the same time, the Ramayana, which is the ancient Sanskrit epic.
This is a very involved question. I'm sure it's a very brilliant question and very involved, and I'm hearing about 30%. My receivers are not receiving 100%. I'm getting old, and my hearing isn't so good. And you speak fast. I'm suffering. I want to hear what you're saying, but it's not coming through.
Okay, here is the question is like, because instead of ready,
keep it simple. Yeah, it'll help me.
Yeah, keeping it simple. Mahabharata was, as per the knowledge that I know or I read, it was the oldest one is written in 400 BC. That's what.
400 what?
400 BC.
Oh, 400 BC. This is scholarly people saying stuff, dating of things.
Yeah, dates. That's what I mentioned. So the Ramayana at the same time was written by Valmiki, sage Valmiki, and around 500 BC.
Oh,
500 BC to 100.
rubbish.
So what is that? There is because as per that Ramayana happened before, and why that dates contradiction?
Well,
right?
yeah,
That's
this
the
is
question.
Shabda Praman. That's from souls that have defects. We have a place for that. It's a little receptacle called the garbage can. We don't take knowledge from persons with defective senses and speculative powers. We just don't take knowledge from those people. So my advice to you is don't find Apaurushaya Shabda, and then you get right knowledge. Now, for example, what do the Vedas say, aside from modern scholarship and dating and things and blah, blah, blah? What do the Vedas say? When did Valmiki live? And when did Valmiki write Ramayana? And when did the activities of Ramayana occur? And you go to the Apaurushaya Shabda Praman, evidence, and there's the answer. And it doesn't have to match what you just put over in the garbage bin over here. Because those are people that they have scholarship and they have some basis for saying whatever they're saying, but it's imperfectly derived. Fundamentally flawed. I'm not going to bother, with such people. Thank you. No. On what basis does a scholar come up with these numbers? I don't know. I'm interested in perfect knowledge from the perfect person. That's the apurusheya person, beyond the defects of a human being. That's what I'm interested in.
But when we are reading that's the thing that is a
But I don't read those things. You read those things. That's up to you. That sound vibration is creating confusion unnecessarily. So be selective where you're getting your sound vibrations from. What's the source? I'll give a little practical example. This is just worldly, totally worldly. So when I leave here, I'm going to be traveling by air to New York City. And from New York City, the plan is I'm going to go to our farm community in Pennsylvania. So the flight is with Southwest Airlines. If I want to find out if the flight is on time, I have to go to an authority. Call up the 800 number, or check online or something. It's not like I ask a gas station attendant, is the flight going to be on time? You have to hear from the right person. And what to speak of knowing about things that are transcendental. I'm not going to go and ask some scholarly fellow, what's your opinion? I'm going to go to apurusheya sources. Once upon a time, I was a college kid. A few lifetimes ago. And my philosophy professor gave me a Bhagavad Gita because we spent time together. We had a friendship. He read some poetry. He was nice, a really nice person, very warm, friendly, very open. So I thought he gave me a book of poetry. So I was carrying around my books, and somebody saw, oh, I have one of those, but it's different. So here, you take mine too. So now I have 2 Bhagavad Gitas. I'm still thinking it's a book of poetry. So I said, look, there's 2. I bet there's more. So I went to the library, 5 more translations of Bhagavad Gita. I checked them all out. I read 7 Bhagavad Gitas, and I came to 2 conclusions. It's not a book of poetry, and I don't understand it. Time passed. I got Bhagavad Gita number 8. Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. Started reading it. It was really easy to understand. And I was wondering, why is it so easy to understand? 7 others, I couldn't understand it at all. But I kept reading it because it was nice. And then I could understand. Because it's coming from descending knowledge. It's coming from realization of descending knowledge. It's not coming from the ascending process. Looking for the sun with a flashlight. That's not how you find the sun. It's self-luminous. This descending knowledge is like that. So when you connect with descending knowledge, that's all you need. You don't need, what the other 7 versions. And there's not only 7, there's hundreds of one book. And what to speak of, this means that, and there was no Kurukshetra battle, and on and on and on and on and on and on. And to be a scholar, you have to come up with something new. And you dance on a stage with something new. I did that. I'm not. I don't want to do that. I want, because that's what the Vedas say. It's to be understood through descending process. Chapter 4, Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says it very, very firmly. That's what I want. And some people don't want. Okay. They're given some playground to play in. And some tools and shovels in a sandbox, and they can go play in their intellectual playground and write things about, and it goes on. There's lots of it. I know a devotee, 3 devotees, that are working on rewriting textbooks for India, because the textbooks in India had the thumbprint of the British that are now still today taught in public schools in India, that has a whole perspective on everything, like, the Aryan invasion and, putting India down. And it's like, wait a minute. They want to rewrite the textbooks for schools that has reality as it comes from Upaurushaya Shabda, that matches some empiric information, but we don't buy into Professor so-and-so. Don't waste your time. So what's the alternative? Find sources that are in this descending process, and you'll find consensus. There are multiple ones. They may use different language, but the principles are essentially the same. Connect with that. Save yourself some time and trouble. You have something?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. You just told us about how Shabda is important because, the Japa association, you talked about all that. Vedas are also Apaurishaya, right?
Yes.
And these Puranas, some of the Upanishads, they detail the, rituals so extensively.
Yes, they do.
What do you do? I'm satisfied with just japa, some naivedya, and I'm happy. But, there are certain things you don't even have control over those things. You can die on a bed, you can die in this half of the year. You don't have control over it, but they're all over in Puranas and Vedas. So do you still, do we still have to worry about them, or just
No.
leave it to Krishna?
No. Do you have to worry about them? No. Here's the big picture, put in simple language. The Vedas are sometimes compared to a desire tree. A regular tree, it'll produce a certain type of fruit or flower during a certain season only. But a desire tree can produce any amount of fruit during any season for anything. And the Vedas are likened to a desire tree. So, with that picture, there's some portions of the Vedas that deal with rituals. A vast portion of the Vedas that deal with rituals for fulfilling material desires. You do this ritual, go to this Devi or that Deva, and voila. Your desires are met. That's the desire tree of the Vedas. There's another section of the Vedas, more of a thinner section, that's the Upanishads. And that's for people who have philosophical orientation. They want to understand the soul rather than just understand fulfilling material desires. That's the Upanishads for that group of people. And then there's even thinner section, but it's throughout all of the Vedas, including the Upanishads and the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, the ritual section of the Vedas, that teaches that you should satisfy Vishnu. So you're saying back your question, is it sufficient just to satisfy Vishnu? Yes? You pour water on the root of a tree, and all the leaves, branches, twigs, and trunk, and all the other parts of the tree are satisfied. My needs are met by one thing. Pour water on the root of the tree. What's the root? What's the root of all existence? Vishnu. So let me give my attention to Vishnu. Do I need to worry about all these other things? No. It's not detrimental to learn about all these things. It's nice. Learn about all these things if you like. But I don't know so much about the rituals and da 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 da. I'm interested in that which is going to enhance my remembrance of Krishna. Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mamnas. Those four things finished. So sufficient. What's the purpose saying another verse of Bhagavad Gita? What's the purpose of all that stuff? All the Vedic the desire tree stuff. What's the purpose? It's right in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, the purpose is to know me. Vedaischa sarva eva vejo. Vedanta kred veda ved eva chaham. The purpose of the Vedas is to know me. Vedyo. The purpose of the Vedas is to know me. So, is it sufficient to know Krishna? Yes. Supposing you don't want to know Krishna, you want stuff. So, that the desire tree has stuff for people that want stuff. And find dharmic ways to get what they want. And there is elevation, for sure. And not only get stuff, but there's elevation in the modes of nature, making them more eligible for knowledge, and then making them more eligible for a life of devotion. Is it sufficient to have a life of devotion? Yes. Is that all right?
And I heard something recently. I mean, I don't want to take any names, but somebody was,
Skip the name.
preaching that, you get to, I don't know if he meant heaven or, whatever spiritual world you want to go to, you can go there only with with your whole body. So basically, my friend hearing that, she withdrew. How in, you can put in your driver's license that you are an organ donor. She took her name away. That really disturbed me. Does it really matter? I mean, I want to help, I want to help, I want to donate my organs so that it helps other people. Does it really, matter? Or is it like something that he came up with?
It's something he came up with.
Yeah.
Shastra Praman.
He
Shastra.
gave Shastra Praman, that
There's no
was-
organ. There's no organ donor shastra. No such thing.
If your body has to go on the funeral pyre as a whole. So that's what he was proposing, and she withdrew her.
But the body going onto a funeral pyre has nothing. I'll say it 3 times. Nothing to do with the destiny of the soul going to the spiritual realm.
Thank you.
Nothing. It has something to do with elevation by recognizing rituals and performing rituals according to Dharma. There's a dharmic ritual of burning the body and certain mantras and rituals when that happens for the elevation of the soul to the next destination. That's Dharma, that's of the material side. There's material Dharma that leads to elevation. But there's transcendence. It has nothing to do with the ritual. So those kinds of rituals. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And there's no shastra for what all this other stuff. So you have something.
Yeah, so a continuation. When a soul, when he is living, he or she is living, when he doesn't do any good thing or anything, even if we do all the rituals according to Dharma.
Even if he doesn't all the what? Speak
when
slowly and clearly. Help me.
When the soul is here.
The soul is?
When the soul, when a person is in this earth plane, okay.
The person is injured.
The person is here and on earth living.
Yeah. Person is on earth living. Then?
He doesn't do any good.
Doesn't do any good.
And so when he dies, we perform all these dharmic rituals. Does it?
Yes, the same.
Then what happens?
Then there's the soul essence.
Well, it's no harm. There's something is better than nothing. But doesn't mean a good destination because you did some ritual at the end. Does that answer your question?
No, how does it actually?
How does it? Because acknowledging the purpose behind all the Vedas is to reach Krishna. So if you do something that's dharmic, it has a long thread, but it connects to the source of the Vedas. So that thread that it connects to the source of the Vedas, there's some benefit to the soul, even if that soul has done zero other dharmic activities. They've done adharmic activities. But there's something at the end that's something dharmic, so it's beneficial. Doesn't mean they go to heaven because you did some dharmic ritual at the end. There's something just by acknowledging the Vedas. Just by acknowledging the Vedas. You want to hear a nice story?
Yes.
Sure. And we'll end with this. There's a very nice description in an authoritative book named Hari Bhakti Vilas that's describing the benefit, even unknowingly performed benefit, of observing Ekadasi. You know what Ekadasi is? Okay. So there's a Puranic story of who Prahlad Maharaj was in his previous life. He asks Lord Nrsimhadev, how did I get this benefit? It's a long story, but the short of it is, in your previous life you were a Brahmana, you had become fallen, you were associating with a prostitute, and you had a quarrel with the prostitute on Ekadasi day, and you became very upset, and you observed complete fasting all day and all night. You were so upset. But unknowingly observing Ekadasi, you've now gotten my association. And the prostitute, she was also upset, this text says, and she became an apsara, and in her next life she also attained association with the Lord. Unknowingly. So what to speak of knowingly? Now, so if one unknowingly does something, although they were previously bad and doing adharmic things, that even unknowingly someone on their behalf performs a ritual of funeral and et cetera, and says mantras, there's some benefit. Doesn't mean the slate's clean. Something. Okay. Interesting group this evening. Anything online? Quite a few? Okay, you're going to be all very happy and patient while we hear the online few questions. Now, watch how she reads slowly and clearly, because she knows I'm half deaf. Go ahead.
From Kirti Prabhu.
Kirti. How many questions does Kirti have? Only 2.
I heard you say Kapila Dev is Lord of Shantaras. Does this mean he exemplifies this mellow just like Akrura exemplified Vandanam?
Not exactly.
Kapila Dev's
Because Shanta is a rasa, and Kirtanam is one of the activities of bhakti. There are 2 different lists. Next.
Kapila Dev's teachings of Sankhya philosophy are titled Devotional Service in Srimad Bhagavatam. What is the destination of someone practicing Sankhya Yoga as opposed to Bhakti Yoga?
One who practiced Sankhya Yoga properly will conclude that practice of Sankhya philosophy with bhakti. Just like Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 39. So please read Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 39, where Krishna says to Arjuna, I've described Sankhya, now I'm going to describe Buddhi, or Bhakti. One leads to the other. If one does the Sankhya properly, they'll end up in the realm of bhakti. Next.
From Shrida Das. Mother Devahuti is attached to her pure devotee husband. May I know if her attachment, in any case, would still be considered material?
No. The object is fully spiritual means the consciousness is not. She was very attached to that which is fully spiritual. She's speaking as if she's one of us, but she's not.
We see when a spiritual master leaves, his disciples also feel separation.
Yes.
May I kindly know the difference between these two attachments?
Which two?
I think the Devahuti and...
It's quite similar. Hers is pure and ours is not. But it's quite similar.
From Radhavallabh Prabhu.
Yeah.
In relation to sound, when practicing devotees are part of duty.
Part of?
Duty, like work.
Duties? Okay, duties.
We actively interact with people infested with modes of passion. So if our consciousness is impacted by this association, does it reflect our quality of morning sadhana?
Of course, everything affects your consciousness, sadhana and otherwise. So how to immunize yourself from that kind of association? You know, given your situation and many householder situations, they have occupation where they're associating with persons that are not pure. They're, as you said in your question, they're in the mode of passion. You have your toxic suit on. You know, you're inoculated or protected because you're thinking, I'm here in this workplace as a representative and instrument of Krishna. As you're thinking, for those who are thinking in that way, they're protected. And if you're not thinking in that way, to some degree, you're susceptible to becoming infected with their mode. Just like if you're in a place where there's COVID, you're potentially exposed to become infected. So you can take inoculation, but you still wear your mask. Next.
A follow-up to Mataji's question. Should we donate blood if we only survive?
Should we do what?
Donate blood?
Give blood.
If we only survive on prasadam.
That's a stretch. This whole modern system of organ donors, and it's a patchwork that isn't really on the transcendental platform at all. Doesn't mean you cannot, should not, must not, or you get spanked. It's just, it's not part of Vedic culture to do these things. It doesn't mean you can't do these things, but a lot depends on the consciousness. But there are much better ways, my dear devotee who is asking this question. Just feed people prasadam instead of giving your blood that's coming from a body that's had prasadam. That's it. Well, that's a nice note to end on. Thank you very much. Prabhupada ki